Good morning Year 5 and welcome back to day 2 of our first week of shape, space and measure. Here are your answers from yesterday. It's page 1 and page 2. Not sure if that fits on. Then we've got today's fluency, so I will put the questions there if you want to give yourself a 5-minute timer. Here are your answers to day 2's fluency. So today we're just going to recap on some shape names and we're going to talk about a special set of shapes. So we've got a circle here. Haven't really talked about curved sides. There's a circle. This is a triangle. It's an equilateral triangle actually because all the sides and angles are the same. But at this point we've already done a week on triangles. We're going to just use the term triangle for today. You'll notice I've missed out 4-sided shapes, the quadrilaterals, because that's what we're going to focus on today. This is a regular pentagon. Now, we use root words that come from Latin or Greek to help us remember how many sides each shape has. So penta comes from 5, and a pentagon is a 5-sided shape. This particular one is a regular pentagon. It's really important that you realise that not every pentagon looks like that, and we'll look at some more in a minute. This is a regular hexagon. Now, the way I remember it is hex and 6, both have an X in them. Okay, that's a 6-sided shape. All 6-sided shapes are called hexagons, even if they don't look quite like that. That's a regular hexagon. All of these are regular now, okay? So this is regular and it's got 7 sides. Now it's always a bit difficult because lots of people think it's a septagon, but it's actually a heptagon, like the heptathlon. It's got 7 events. It's a heptagon. This one, most people will remember this because of octopuses having 8 legs. Nearly wrote regular octopus then. A regular octagon, because it has 8 sides, and that's regular, remember, because all the sides are equal and all the angles are equal. This is a 9-sided shape, which is known as a nonagon. And this one, in case you hadn't already counted, is a 10-sided shape, and this one is regular, and it's a regular decagon. If you wanted to carry on, 11 I think is hendecagon, and 12 is dodecagon. Okay, so those are just some regular shapes that we've met before, but it's really important that we do recognise that other shapes could be these as well. So we're going to look at some more. We're going to make sure we know what they're called. So there's this one first. So that doesn't look like anything too familiar, so we do have to count the sides. If you're counting the sides of an unfamiliar shape, good idea to mark them off as you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't get that mixed up, of course, with the lines we draw to show that they're equal. It's got 6 sides. Therefore, it's a hexagon. It's not a regular hexagon, but it is a hexagon. Let's have a look at this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sides. So it's a heptagon, not regular, but a heptagon. I'm going to miss that one out because it's a 4-sided shape. We'll come to talk about that in a minute. This one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's an octagon. It's not regular, but it is an octagon. This one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is a pentagon. It's a regular pentagon. And this looks like a star, doesn't it? But star isn't the mathematical term we would use. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's a decagon. Now, you might be sitting thinking, but all the sides are equal, so it's a regular decagon. All the sides are equal, but the angles aren't. If you can see, we've got some acute angles here, and we've actually got some reflex angles in there as well. Okay, so that was just a recap really of different shape names. Do make sure if you're asked to investigate a shape, you do think about whether it's regular or not, and know that certain shapes, for example, and apologies for my lack of a ruler here, but for example that isn't an arrow, it's a picture of an arrow, but the shape is actually a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a heptagon. It's an irregular heptagon, but it's a heptagon nonetheless. Okay, so those are the shapes that we just wanted to recap. Now we're going to talk about specifically four-sided shapes or quadrilaterals. Quadrilaterals generally fit into 6 main categories, but we're going to talk a little bit about them. Here's a few that we might use to sort, and here are some words that we might use when we're talking about them, okay? Now, again, just like I said with the other shapes, it's important to realise that a shape name isn't just one shape, it's a whole group of shapes. So that the square, there could be lots of squares that are squares. They're not all identical. They're similar, but they're not identical. Okay, so here's some examples of some four-sided shapes. Now, you may already know the names of some of these, so you might want to pause the video and have a little look, because we're going to talk through what they're called and what their specific properties might be, and then I'm going to give you a task to do for tomorrow. Okay, so let's talk about one particular type of shape first. I think we'll start with the regular quadrilateral, which is a square. Now I will come back to these. Now I have done a little sheet here with a few different squares on. This is still a square. A square is a square, no matter which way round you have it. Still a square, still a square, still a square. Just because it isn't put with 2 horizontal and 2 vertical lines, it is still a square. What makes it a square then? What are the properties of this square? Well, the reason I've drawn more than one is because I want you to have a look and think about what they all have in common. So we couldn't say, for example, all squares have 2 horizontal and 2 vertical lines. This one does, and this one does, but this one doesn't. But there are things we can say. We can say that all the sides are equal on each of our squares. So one of the properties of a square is that all sides are equal. Okay, all of them. We haven't mentioned the number of sides. They've all got 4 sides. So we could put has 4 sides, or we could have said is a quadrilateral, because a quadrilateral is the term we can use for any 4-sided shape, even ones that don't fit into one of the categories we're going to talk about today. So we've talked about sides. We could say that opposite sides are equal and adjacent sides are equal. We've already covered that in all sides equal. So what about angle then? Well, this one has got 1 right angle, 2 right angles, 3 right angles, 4 right angles. So has this one. And so has this one. So we could say that has 4 right angles. We could also say that something about perpendicular there, because we know that if it makes a right angle, then it's got to have perpendicular lines. We could also mention parallel. We might say opposite sides are parallel. I mean, I know that goes without saying that they're opposite, but just to show that you're using the right language. Opposite sides are parallel, and adjacent sides are perpendicular because they meet at right angles. Okay, we might, haven't written it here, but we might mention symmetry. We could, let's just do it on this one, say that a square has 1, 2. If you're not sure about symmetrical, just miss it out on this one. But we could say it has 4 lines of symmetry. We could draw those on that one and that one. So we could add that. Oops. Has 4 lines of symmetry. Now, one thing we haven't really talked about, but I will talk about now because it will be relevant later, are diagonals. The diagonals are the lines you get when you join the corners. So if I have this square here, I'm going to use the one in the middle because it's easier to see, and it would be much better if you could do it with a ruler. When we do the diagonals on a square, they cross at right angles. Okay, so the diagonals always, if I do it here, you'll see the same thing. Okay, they always cross at right angles. Might be worth just knowing that for one of the later shapes. diagonals cross, we could say it's bisected, but we'll leave it at cross for now. Diagonals cross at right angles. Okay, so those are all the things that make a square a square. So let's have a look on this line then. Along this line, which of these is a square? I know you already know, but I'm just going through the process because in a minute it's going to be your turn. Has all sides equal? No, that's not a square. Has all sides equal? No, that's not a square. That has all sides equal. That might be a square. Has all sides equal? No, not a square. Has all sides equal? No, not a square. Has all sides equal? Yes, that could be a square. Or could it? I'd have to probably just measure that. I think. Okay, so what we have now is basically a list of all the properties of a square. So what you could do if you had a shape is go through, or a set of shapes, working out which one's which. So for example, we just start at the top of the list. The first one, all sides equal. That rules this one out. That's not a square. That's not equal. That could be. They're not equal. They're not equal. They might be equal, and they definitely are. Okay, so they all could at the moment be squares, judging by the first property. Let's go to the second one. Has four sides, is a quadrilateral. Yep, all still in. Has four right angles. Yes, no, no. So that tells us that that is a square. What I'm going to do now is show you the other types of quadrilateral that I have drawn. And I want you to take those and create your own list of properties. Now you could, if you've got the sheets printed off, you could just use my sheets, or you could draw your own shapes, but I've purposely drawn more than one type of each shape so you can really make sure that you get the properties correct. Okay, so rectangle. Now one thing that's worth mentioning is a square is a type of rectangle. Okay, it's a regular rectangle. But for the purposes of this, I would like you to tell me the properties of rectangles that aren't squares. Okay, so again, you can draw your own or you can use mine and just come up with a list of properties that all rectangles have. That's why I've done different ones there. They've got to be common to all rectangles. So we had a square, rectangle. Then we've got a rhombus. Now I've just put a little mark on here to remind you how you show that opposite sides are parallel. So you couldn't say, a rhombus has two horizontal lines and two vertical lines, or two horizontal lines. This one does have two horizontal lines, but these don't, and they are all rhombuses. So whatever you write down, it has to be the same for each of the shapes. Okay, so has four sides would be correct because they've all got four sides. So that's a rhombus. The next one is a kite. Now usually we think of a kite as this shape. This is also a kite, sometimes called an inverted kite. When you come up with your list of properties, make sure that you could relate it to this as well. A little clue for that one is you might want to try drawing some diagonals and see where they meet. Okay, so those are some kites. And the last one I'm going to ask you to look at and to write a list for me is a trapezium. Now, often trapeziums look like this or this. Sometimes they might be symmetrical, like this one. But it's worth knowing that sometimes a trapezium looks like this or this. So sometimes it might have two right angles, sometimes it doesn't. So you can't use right angles as one of the properties of a trapezium. You'll need to look somewhere else, for example, parallel lines. Okay, there is one more type of quadrilateral, and it's a parallelogram. Now, I'm not going to ask you to do this one because parallelograms are actually a bit more of an overarching general way of describing shapes, because a rectangle is a parallelogram, and so is a square, and so is a rhombus, and that's another example of a parallelogram. So the definition of a parallelogram is actually that it has two sets of parallel lines. Okay, so here is a copy of today's task. So you need to create an information booklet or information sheets about each of the quadrilaterals, and there is a word bank on here to help you as well. I'll be back tomorrow.